Something about Keith Urban doesn't feel the same anymore, and people are starting to notice. Keith Urban was living the kind of life most people only imagine, and then something shifted in a way that left even longtime fans doing a double take. He's always been the steady one, the calm presence, the man who seemed to have it all figured out. But lately, there's been a quiet transformation unfolding, subtle at first, then impossible to ignore. The energy, the choices, the way he carries himself. Now it all feels different, and the truth behind that shift is far more unexpected than anyone realized. So the question is, what really changed, and why now? His greatest comeback. January 6, 2026, marked the official close of a long chapter in Keith Urban's life. The divorce from Nicole Kidman that had captured headlines and fueled speculation was finalized, leaving him free but also facing the reality of rebuilding. After 19 years of putting family first, Keith suddenly had to carve space for himself again emotionally, professionally, and physically. And just days after the settlement, a video of Keith leaving a Nashville mediation session went viral on TikTok, showing him looking lean, serious, and wearing a black leather jacket that fans immediately dubbed his revenge-era wardrobe. Weeks later, he made a choice that surprised many. Instead of diving straight into stadium tours, he joined the Top Shelf Country Cruise aboard the Celebrity Reflection in late February 2026, performing for roughly 1,100 passengers alongside Lee Brice and Scotty McCreery. Keith traded arenas for intimate stages under open skies in Nassau. At first glance, a cruise ship gig might seem modest for a superstar, but insiders explain it was practical. Cruise ships aren't the dream gig, one source said, but they pay the bills and give him something to focus on. Fans on board noticed something different. The energy was raw, unfiltered, and deeply personal. Videos showed Keith's toned, tattooed torso front and center, not just for show, but as armor for this fresh start. The cruise performances kept him grounded, but a major change was happening behind the scenes. In February 2026, Keith broke with his longtime manager, Gary Borman, after 25 years together. Borman retired, and Keith joined Crush Management, the powerhouse firm handling Miley Cyrus, Green Day, and Sia. The move signaled a shift toward pop rock elements blending with his country roots. At the same time, Keith began renovating his Nashville studio, posting cryptic Instagram stories of new recording equipment and guitar racks. Then came the bombshell. At the country radio seminar in March 2026, Keith revealed his next project would be a covers album celebrating yacht rock from the 1970s and 1980s. Think Christopher Cross, Michael McDonald, and Toto. It would include one original song and potential collaborations with Little Big Town and John Mayer. Fans initially laughed, thinking it was a prank. It wasn't. This wasn't a safe, planned undertaking. It was an artistic risk that showed a man unafraid to try new sounds after divorce and life change. The external transformation mirrored the internal one. Keith looked leaner and sharper, and he seemed more sure of himself. The tattooed torso, once a personal symbol, became a public statement, a visual reminder of strength and putting oneself first. Keith had always put others first: family, work, fans. Now he was putting himself first. Fitness, grooming, and style weren't just for show. They were armor for this reset. What makes this reset humbling is that Keith didn't let ego get in the way. He went from sold-out stadiums to a cruise ship stage without complaint. Playing for 1,100 people under the stars might not be as glamorous as a tour, but it gave him something bigger: perspective, focus, and a reminder of why he loved music in the first place. Away from the cameras and wild press speculation, Keith could connect, create, and breathe. This chapter of Keith's life isn't a downfall. It's planned, intentional, and empowering. After addiction and tragedy, he's showing that you don't have to start over at the top to reinvent yourself. Sometimes you just have to step into smaller rooms to restore your confidence, try new things, and find joy in simple moments. The cruise, concerts, new management, studio renovations, and risky album choices aren't just actions, they're signals. Keith Urban is taking charge of his story, getting his voice back, and showing the world that a legend can rise again without a lot of fuss, one mindful step at a time. Fans, insiders, and onlookers are paying close attention. The man who used to put family and job first is now prioritizing his own health, art, and freedom. Lessons from sobriety and hard times have taught him strength, patience, and bravery. This isn't a flashy comeback, it's a grounded, humble reset, a lesson in turning endings into new beginnings. Keith Urban's 2026 shows that real power frequently comes from within, and that it's never too late to change your own story, even after years of fame and love. The Roots, the boy from down under who chased perfection. Before the fame, before the spotlight, there was just a kid trying to get a sound right on a guitar. Keith Urban didn't grow up anywhere near the world. He would later dominate. He was raised in Caboolture, Australia, a quiet town where life was simple. Nothing about that environment suggested global success. But by age 8, he was deeply focused on the guitar, not casually playing, but repeating chords, adjusting his fingers, listening, correcting himself. Hours passed without him noticing. As a teenager, that focus sharpened. He joined local bands, played small venues, and entered competitions not just to win, but to test himself. Eventually, he realized staying in Australia would limit his growth. So he moved to Nashville in his early 20s, stepping into a completely new world with no guarantees. He played to crowds that weren't paying attention. Rejection showed up often. But he adjusted, practiced more, studied artists like Johnny Cash, and refused to settle for songs that were just okay. That perfectionism became impossible to ignore. By the late 90s and early 2000s, his sound started reaching more people. Audiences connected with his honesty. That discipline, the constant self-correction, built something deeper than skill. When people look at the transformation happening now, it might seem sudden, but it traces back to this exact phase, a period where nothing was guaranteed, and the only thing keeping him moving was his refusal to stop improving. Love, Rock Bottom, and The Lifeline named Nicole. By 2005, Keith Urban was rising fast. The music was working, the crowds were growing, but off-stage, years of touring and pressure had taken a toll. Alcohol and substances had become part of how he coped. Then he met Nicole Kidman. The connection was immediate and fast. They married in 2006 in a private Sydney ceremony. But shortly after the wedding, Keith checked himself into rehab. That choice surprised many, but it revealed how serious things had become. Nicole didn't step back. She stayed consistent. Keith later called her the lifeline he wasn't sure he deserved. Recovery wasn't instant. It required discipline, setbacks, and continuous effort. Over time, things stabilized. They welcomed 2 daughters, Sunday Rose and Faith Margaret. Their Nashville home became a calm space. But even within that stability, challenges remained. Time apart became routine. In 2013, another substance-related incident brought attention back to his struggles. He acknowledged it and recommitted to staying on track. What defined this period wasn't perfection, it was persistence. Keith made his connection to Nicole visible through interviews, music, and even tattoos dedicated to her. That level of emotional investment made their relationship feel unshakable, which is why what comes later feels so unexpected. When a person builds their stability around someone who helped hold them together, any shift in that relationship doesn't just affect emotions, it changes identity. The stable years that weren't so stable. For nearly 20 years, Keith and Nicole gave the world a picture-perfect story. Multi-platinum albums, Grammy wins, Oscars, 2 daughters. It all looked unshakable. But fame gives a lot, and it also takes. Keith's High and Alive World Tour in 2025 had him on the road for months. Nicole's filming schedule pulled her across continents. Friends later said their priorities began to drift. Keith was immersed in music and stage life. Nicole quietly wished for deeper emotional connection at home. By 2025, the strain became harder to ignore. On stage, Keith's energy had subtle shifts, small lyric tweaks, a different intensity. Behind the scenes, he parted ways with longtime band members he'd worked with for over 25 years. Physically, he became leaner. By the 2025 CMA Awards, he appeared sharper, more energized, with a bolder wardrobe showcasing his tattooed arms. Observers wondered if these changes were preparation for a new chapter, a response to stress, or both. Then came September 2025. Everyone assumed they had forever, but the couple had quietly separated earlier that summer. Nicole filed for divorce on September 30th, citing irreconcilable differences. The public reaction was immediate. Fans who had seen them overcome addiction and build a family were stunned. The divorce was finalized on January 6, 2026. Nicole retained primary custody of Sunbae 17 and Faith 15. Reports indicated Keith pushed for the split, while Nicole had hoped to save the marriage. Looking back, these stable years were anything but simple. Publicly, they appeared successful and connected. Privately, maintaining that image required constant effort, long absences, emotional distance, the relentless spotlight. Over time, the small cracks accumulated. This chapter prepared Keith for what came next. The discipline and resilience he practiced while navigating fame and family laid the groundwork for the transformation that would captivate the world after 2025. The divorce, band shake-up, and lyric bombshells. 2025 became the year everything changed. While the High and Alive tour rolled across the country, fans noticed subtle shifts, extra emotion in familiar songs, new lyric twists. One of the first major changes came in his band. After more than 25 years, Keith parted ways with longtime bassist Jerry Flowers and his lead guitarist. He described it as listening to his inner voice, but the timing aligned closely with the private unraveling of his marriage. On stage, Keith's lyrics took on sharper edges. In The Fighter, he gave a shout-out to female guitarist Maggie Ba, a gesture that felt unusual and pointed. Meanwhile, You'll Think of Me included added lines like, "stupid bull reasons," which fans quickly interpreted as a candid nod to marital struggles. For the first time, his songs didn't just tell stories, they hinted at his own experiences, turning familiar tracks into intimate confessions. The divorce itself was finalized in January 2026. Sources reported that Nicole had hoped to salvage the marriage, while Keith decided it was time to move forward. Financially, the settlement was significant, as is common in high-profile divorces. But more than that, the emotional impact was profound. Keith had to navigate separation while maintaining his career, public image, and responsibilities as a father, all under intense scrutiny. Physically, the changes were deliberate. Keith appeared leaner and more toned at awards shows, showing a sharper silhouette and new attention to style. Tattoos honoring Nicole remained visible, raising questions about whether they were reminders, tributes, or simply part of his story. The contrast was striking. The man who had celebrated love publicly was now projecting independence and resilience. The unraveling reflected a deeper emotional process. Keith had overcome addiction before, with Nicole's support. Now, sobriety offered tools. But the challenge was new: heartbreak, emotional loss, and public scrutiny. Every decision, band shake-ups, lyric edits, physical transformation, was a response to this complex moment. It was a collision of personal evolution and professional reinvention. Fans watching his live shows noticed the intensity. Songs that once felt celebratory now carried hints of sadness and resilience. Every chord seemed to hold extra meaning. Many wondered if these performances were Keith's way of saying goodbye, quietly documenting the end of a marriage without a formal announcement. Despite the upheaval, Keith maintained public calm. Interviews remained measured, social media was carefully managed, and he kept the music as the central focus. But behind the composure was a man at a crossroads facing the end of a 19-year marriage, the loss of everyday connection with the woman who had once been his lifeline, and the challenge of redefining his life while staying in the public eye. Keith Urban is turning heads like never before. Post-divorce, he's leaner, tattooed, and reinventing his music and life with bold new sounds and intimate performances. Fans are captivated by his fearless transformation and inspiring journey of resilience. Like, comment, and subscribe to stay updated on Keith's incredible story and all the moments everyone's talking about.